Buonasera a tutti e grazie di essere qua oggi pomeriggio per questo incontro inusuale, ma sicuramente molto interessante. Un particolare ringraziamento al professor David Hollander, ai relatori, alle autorità, a tutti voi che avete accolto il nostro invito di partecipare a questa presentazione, ma non sarà una presentazione, sarà un bel dialogo attorno a uno dei libri che ho definito con lo stesso autore tra i più politici che abbia letto ultimamente. Un libro di politica nel più alto senso del termine, perché rappresenta un modo di approcciarsi ai grandi temi che l'umanità deve affrontare in maniera positiva e dando delle indicazioni che sono utilissime per essere discusse. Sono state talmente utili che ricordo che grazie a David Hollander e grazie al suo impegno le Nazioni Unite hanno deciso di definire una giornata, la giornata mondiale del basket. Questo per dire che il pallacanestro può essere uno sport, ma è anche tante cose, tante altro, e David insieme a Flavio Tranquillo e a Zuretti riusciranno a esplicitare questi concetti. Prima di tutto, e non voglio rubarvi altro tempo perché sono loro i protagonisti, vorrei passare la parola per un saluto alla vicepresidente della Giunta Autonoma di Trento, la dottoressa Francesca Gerosa.
Grazie, buon pomeriggio a tutte e a tutti. Il mio vuole essere un saluto breve perché siamo tutti interessati ad ascoltarla. Io credo che questo libro sì può essere definito un libro di politica, io lo vorrei definire come un libro di visione, la visione di una società per come dovrebbe essere il cuore di una società. Cioè quando noi immaginiamo il giocatore di basket con una palla in mano, con una squadra con cui collaborare per raggiungere un obiettivo, non possiamo che pensare all'individuo all'interno di una società che, contando sulle proprie capacità, sulle proprie competenze, all'interno di una comunità può raggiungere i più grandi obiettivi. Sappiamo quanto lo sport sia un esempio per i nostri giovani, quanto nello sport i nostri ragazzi possono imparare dei valori importanti, dei valori che siano poi una guida nella loro crescita. Ecco, con questo libro non solo si parla dei valori dello sport, ma si dà a questi valori un significato ancora più concreto, tangibile. Possiamo immaginare davvero in questa rappresentazione che lei ha dato in modo molto sapiente quella che è una comunità o come dovrebbe essere una comunità. Quindi un libro che deve essere un esempio, che spero che i nostri giovani vogliano leggere con grande entusiasmo. Sicuramente noi come provincia, come anche assessorato allo sport, ci faremo promotori di una diffusione perché davvero in questo libro possiamo trovare tanto. Quindi io la ringrazio, mi complimento per il suo importante lavoro. Grazie.
Volevo fare una precisazione. Parliamo di un libro che noi volevamo avere delle copie qua, purtroppo non per colpa nostra, ma della casa editrice, non sono arrivate, quindi mi dispiace, chi voleva acquistarlo doveva farlo magari in un'altra situazione. Era giusto dirlo perché non vedete copie e magari ve lo chiedete perché. Ora la parola la passo al sindaco di Trento, Franco Ianeselli, per un saluto. Grazie.
Salve a tutti. A warm welcome to you, David. I hope you like the city. Ok? Allora, io sto leggendo il libro. Di che cosa parla? Parla del fatto che cooperando, guardandosi negli occhi in un campo da basket, le cose migliorano, funzionano di più. It's okay? Okay, your book is about cooperation.
Yeah, let's talk basketball.
Ok. Sul fatto che la cooperazione tra le persone, il guardarsi negli occhi, ok, aiuta, si migliora. Se voi pensate a che cosa abbiamo fatto noi in Trentino in tutti questi anni, che cosa abbiamo fatto? Abbiamo cooperato, quali sono i nostri valori? Abbiamo fatto mutualità, abbiamo fatto tanto volontariato e abbiamo raggiunto grandi risultati cooperando con la mutualità. E abbiamo anche giocato poco a basket. Pensate se avessimo giocato a basket in tutti questi anni, che cosa saremmo riusciti a fare. Per cui io credo che questo libro è un libro che parla di visione, di futuro e parla anche un po' della nostra comunità, di quelli che sono i nostri valori e certo della necessità che abbiamo, e ne parliamo spesso con Andrea Nardelli, di avere un nuovo palazzetto dello sport e un po' più campi per giocare a basket. Grazie.
Ed ora, come saluto istituzionale, l'assessore regionale Giulia Zanotelli, vicepresidente della Giunta.
Buonasera a tutti, per me è un grandissimo onore essere qui con voi. Io non parlerò tanto del libro perché prima di parlarne vorrei leggerlo e quindi ascolterò con molta attenzione il dibattito che si terrà dopo per trarre poi le opportune conclusioni e valutazioni. Ma c'è un passaggio che mi preme fare qui rispetto a un percorso che va avanti dalla scorsa legislatura. E qui voglio ringraziare l'Aquila Basket, in primi il presidente, tutto il suo staff, la dirigenza e i giocatori per il forte impegno che mettono all'interno della società e della comunità trentina. L'impegno nei vari comparti che sono a me cari, che sono quello dell'ambiente, dell'agricoltura, del clima, del sociale, con una vicinanza molto forte anche al mondo dell'autismo. Pochi mesi fa, inizio di questa legislatura, ora Civezzano, proprio alla presenza vostra, per la presentazione di un progetto che affiancava l'agricoltura e il tema del sociale. Quindi credo che Aquila Basket sia assolutamente un orgoglio per la società trentina, e lo dico non per dirlo, ma perché lo ritengo davvero, perché ho avuto modo di lavorare al vostro fianco anche sul tema delle foreste, con delle iniziative che sono state rivolte anche ai giovani, sui quali dobbiamo assolutamente portare avanti una formazione seria rispetto a questi temi che coinvolgeranno e stanno coinvolgendo il territorio trentino, per cui a voi i miei ringraziamenti non soltanto per l'evento di oggi, ma per tutto il lavoro che fate a servizio della comunità trentina. Grazie a tutti e buona prosecuzione.
Bene, ora io mi siedo e lascio la parola a chi ne sa molto più di me, ovvero al professor David Hollander, ma soprattutto anche a due grandi personaggi che il basket e tutto ciò che ruota attorno ad esso lo conoscono molto bene. Una delle voci più note, chi segue il basket lo conosce benissimo, Flavio Tranquillo, quindi ha bisogno di pochissime presentazioni. E Matteo Zuretti, che lavora per l'NBPA, che è il massimo campionato al mondo professionistico americano, per i due che non lo sanno. Quindi è all'interno di uno dei più grandi eventi sportivi che il pianeta Terra in questo momento conosca di fatto, insomma. Ecco. Saranno loro a interloquire insieme a David Hollander e parlando del libro. Direi un'oretta circa, poi se ci saranno delle domande faremo anche magari un dibattito o delle domande e risposte con il pubblico. Grazie e buon divertimento.
Ok, grazie in italiano. Da qui in poi parlo in inglese, non certo per fare sfoggio del mio povero inglese, ma per evidenti esigenze, diciamo così, di palcoscenico. Spero che non suoni poco educato, ma siete tutti naturalmente in grado di sentire la traduzione. Solidarietà per la poveretta che dovrà tradurre il mio virgolette inglese chiuse le virgolette. Ok, thanks for everything, thanks for being here, thanks David or professor, whatever. Which one? David?
Yes.
Okay, David. Thanks, Matteo, for sure. I know him since a long time. This guy is a professor. This guy is a basketball savant. Is that good? Yeah. Okay. and also by day, by trade, a member of the union of the NBA players, which is a pretty big and pretty interesting mission nowadays. Obviously, we will be talking about basketball, which is a pretty large issue, a large thing. I would like to start from the game and the book. The book is How Basketball Can Save the World. I'm guilty as charged, for the parentheses, question mark, parentheses. We will come to the parentheses later. How basketball can save the world in 2 minutes, David. Or why basketball can save the world.
First of all, it's so nice to be here. I apologize for not speaking Italian and missing the wonderful things that everyone said. But this is a very special place. It's a beautiful place, and I'm just thrilled to have been invited by Andrea Nardelli and Aquila Basket. It's an amazing experience these last few days. How basketball can save the world. I believe simply that it has become harder and harder for people to find one thing, one language, basic values that we can agree on, that we can start with. And because I felt like the world was, 5 years ago, beginning to break, beginning to go in a direction that was full of irreconcilable differences, failing institutions, no trust. I wanted to make the world more like basketball. The way you behave on a basketball court, the way the game is structured, and the promise of what you can be or what a world can be based on how basketball is played and structured. So I thought about the way that I feel when I play, that it's a place that I go where the whole world goes away, and I feel balance, I feel peace, I feel my relations with other people gets right, I feel like the world makes sense. I feel a very great sense of balance and sanctuary. And so many other people that I talk to, when they go to that space, when they go play basketball, they feel the same thing. So I'm a professor. It's my job to think about these things, to research these things, and I tried to give that feeling, that structure, that model, that behavior, language, code, principles. So yes, I play basketball. Yes, I watch basketball. I consume basketball. But now I see it as a philosophy, as a way to solve 21st century problems. That's how basketball can save the world.
Okay, very interesting. As I mentioned, I know Matteo. Matteo knows me. He knows I'm skeptical. He knows I'm critical. He knows I'm old. That is pretty easy. And so when I hear language and one game, I can't help but going with my mind to the idea that I hear pretty often. The European game, the American game, the NBA game, the EuroLeague game, my game, your game, his game. I honestly concur to the notion that there is one game and that basketball is a language, a non-verbal language. I really concur to that. Practice sometimes seems to not to be on the same wavelength, and you are in the best position to try to talk about this, since you started from here, you work in the US, and you're in charge of the international community in the NBA.
Grazie Flavio. In una parola, ero venuto in Italia per parlare in italiano, non ci riesco neanche questa volta. Happy.
I came to Italy just to talk Italian, and I can't.
Not even this time. But yes, Flavio is very skeptical. Flavio is very skeptical. We have plenty of conversations over the phone, and I welcome your challenge. I welcome your challenge. I believe that there are differences. I believe that differences need to be acknowledged. The effort that Professor Hollander David has been doing to give us one code, as per his language, I think is going to help us even more highlight what these differences are. There's people in this ultra-connected world coming from all over, and very often we have the tendency to look at them and, if I think about players, right, hand them a flag. We give Simone Fontecchio the Italian flag, we give Maurice Wagner the German flag, and then we might go to Giannis Antetokounmpo and hand him a Greek flag. Does a Greek flag...
Or a Nigerian flag.
Or Nigerian flag. Or American flag.
Or American flag, maybe.
Because he moved at 18 to the US, he married an American woman, he has 2 American kids. What is the DNA that we pour into this thing called basketball? What is the identity of the players that are pushing this game and society? As David explained us in the book, what is the identity of these people? I think sometimes we have the tendency to simplify, oversimplify. We are guilty of that. When I say we, I mean the industry, because giving an Italian flag to Simone is a great tool. It's a great tool for the business to grow, for example, in this country. There is a hero that people, all of you in this room, or most of you in this room, might associate themselves with, and is doing great things for us, for our community, for our culture, for our identity across the pond. But it's more complicated than that. And those differences, I think, are highlighted on the court and are highlighted off the court. What I observe from my observation point is that the players, and we have some also sitting here today with their stories, personal stories, have mastered the ability to solve those differences. And I do agree with David that one of the tools that they have been using is the game that has sharpened them, that has built them, that has educated them. Now, what the players do as well is to solve that challenge off the court, and I think that's another very interesting part of their life, because they solve that problem every day on an airplane, they solve that problem every day at the wedding, they solve that problem every day in a locker room. They acknowledge their differences, and they are an example of solving those cultural differences every single day, not only on the court, but even off the court.
David, before we dive deep into the principles, which are the pillars of the book and your philosophy, or the basketball philosophy, I would like you to talk us a little bit about the concept of space. I mean, I think your job was pretty much influenced by COVID-19 and the things that happened. I remember Matteo telling me about the joy of seeing each other at the All-Star game. It was 2021, after a long time, seeing people in person. How important is that? And how important is the space in which that happens? Call it the arena, call it the playground, call it the gym, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So it's on 2 levels. One is basketball is a game intentionally created for people to maneuver, navigate, share, understand space together. Small space, not big space, not field, small space, trying to communicate, to see each other, to move. Oh, I'm over here. Yes, you're over there. Okay, I got you. Oh, right, yeah. All these kinds of things, they can only happen in space, intimate, where I see you. And when I see you, I see you. I don't see an other. I don't see a concept of a person that I thought you were. I begin to actually feel, empathize. It's an empathy lab. The intimate spatial experience of basketball is key to the value of basketball. Now, two things I'll share with you about that. What does that mean on one level? Well, when the pandemic, COVID-19, when that happened, right, they took space from us. They said, what we have to do is not be with each other, be apart from each other, be separate from each other. All over the world, they said, if you are together, you could die. But there was one thing that people kept doing all over the world. They kept playing basketball. They kept going to a basketball court. And mayors and governors and heads of state were like, stop playing basketball. So you have to stop. And they wouldn't. They had to take down the rims, physically unscrew the rims. This wasn't happening in tennis. This wasn't happening in other sports. It tells you how much they needed it, how much it made them feel alive. Because, next level, from the time we are born, whether we like it or not, this is a social experience. We are with other people on Earth, and the challenge, like on a basketball court, is to figure out how to share space, Earth, with each other, resources, land, food, air, all of it. I think basketball is a great training for, in exercise, but it stands for the principle that the only way I understand what you need and you understand what I need, and we trust each other, is to have that kind of small space communication. It's a basic thing to be together, but it seems to be a more and more precious thing, and less experienced. And so basketball to me is, it starts with that.
Matteo, we talked about space, we talked about pandemic, and we talked about arenas, which I suspect could be something people will talk in Trento even after we leave. You were there in the bubble, so two things very quick, unfortunately. First, you've seen our gyms, our palazzetti dello sport, their arenas. What would you try to import from the, let's say, NBA model arenas? And second, since you probably thought about that many times, how was it to be the first to put the rims in action for the first time after such a long time, but playing at that level without the general public?
So let's start for the first one. What would I bring? It's a tough comparison, right? Because there is an economic ecosystem that is completely different. The one thing that is clear about these physical spaces, and that is the NBA, the franchises, are becoming real estate companies. I don't want to get too technical here, but basketball generate revenues, okay? These revenues go into a big pot of money. That big pot of money is split between the players, 51%, and the teams, 49%. The NBA is becoming very smart. They are creating revenue streams that don't go into this pot. And one of these revenue streams is actually real estate. So if you guys go to San Francisco, you can go to this marvelous arena by the water. It's called the Chase Center. Yes, you see number 30, pretty decent player, right? What's his name?
Watchable.
Number 30 shooting the lights out from half court. And he's the driver of the ecosystem, right? He's the driver of the economic value. But the team, the club, very smartly has built not only an arena, but insulary buildings around it. That one is Uber headquarters, another one is Google, right? So these are becoming, infrastructure is an asset. That's long story short. Infrastructure is an asset. It's not an asset only for a team to play in it and to be a phenomenal force of community bonding, as I was hearing from some of you guys before, which Aquila is doing, I think, at an amazing level. But it becomes also the sustainability tool for the club to actually keep thriving. We know I'm from this country, so I know there are some layers of complexity to that. Yeah, I would say that the one thing I would steal from the American system is the way we look at infrastructure and the real estate as an asset class more than just a space where we can play ball. Before jumping on the second question, I look around this beautiful room, right? So this is also a space. One of the missions of our organization is to actually help players develop off the court, so to become well-rounded human beings, to be able to survive, if not thrive, while they play and also when they stop playing. And so a big focus of us is to create spaces where they can grow and they can become a better version of themselves. And this is as important. The fact that the club has its own, headquarters in a place that has this type of space that is bringing us all together, I think is important. So it's the court, it's everything adjacent to the court, but it's what's physically available in a community to be able to connect. These guys, the heroes, to the community. Not only while they're playing basketball, but while they're thriving. The bubble, I have some PTSD from it, 2 months in there. But amazing experience. I think there is one characteristic that made it really possible, and that's the absolute superior capacity of American society to be operationally savvy. The level they are able to execute a plan doesn't have any comparison. And I know maybe that's not our best quality. David, that's not our best quality, trust me. But we have many other qualities, like we look at the world very differently. We are creative, we are flexible. So we have our own tools. But yeah, operationally sometimes, we could do better.
Okay, so probably the best thing would be to cooperate. We bring our skills, you bring your skills, and cooperation is the first principle I would like to talk. Idea from a skeptical point of view, of course. I understand that cooperation is important. I think it's important to understand that you cooperate with a goal. The goal in basketball is to score points or not to have the opponent scoring points. So cooperation and roles, in a sense, I think could go together, and roles can't always be exactly the same role for everybody. Phil Jackson tried to give 20 minutes to everybody, didn't work. The same salary to everybody, didn't work. The same amount of shots to everybody, didn't work. Michael Jordan didn't have the same amount of shots of Rodman. Rodman didn't have the same number of rebounds of Michael Jordan. So can you bring us into the cooperation concept?
It is important to ask yourself, what is the goal? What's the point? Toward what end are your philosophies, your systems, your capitalism, your socialism, your communism, whatever you like? What I mean is, as a community, what do you want at the end of the day for your world, for your children? Is it to make more money? Is it to have more likes? Is it to increase your somehow size of your land or something like that? And I'm not a communist, I'm not a capitalist, I'm not any of these things. I'm a basketballist. There are some basic things that we have to acknowledge, and that is, we go nowhere unless we go together. It's not going to happen in basketball, as you pointed out with all the different examples, if we don't look at each other and say, okay, what are we going to do? How is this going to work? It's true that not everyone is equal ability. They're not. But everyone in the right basketball team gets equal respect, equal dignity. We're not all equal ability. It's never going to happen. It's just not a fact of life. But if we know what we want to do together, then we can say, okay, you do this, I'm much better at that, but together we are going to arrive at the goal, which is nobody will be hungry this year. Disease will be cured this year. We'll have a better school this year, because we have established that that's what we're going to do, and what you bring to the table and what I bring to the table, they're not the same, but they get the same respect. Jimmy Butler, who was a great player on the Miami Heat, last year in the NBA Finals, and it's good to use NBA examples because everybody likes the NBA, I guess, and they asked him, they said, hey, there are all these players on your team playing in the finals that weren't drafted. Nobody knew who they were. They are role players. What do you think about the role players on your team? And Jimmy Butler said, role players? I don't know what you're talking about. Those are my teammates. I am their teammate. No difference. Teammates. The idea of cooperation in basketball is based on the very first rule that was invented in the game. You cannot run with the ball. In other words, take the ball, it's mine, and I'm going to run over you or run past you. The only way basketball could advance was to pass. You have to pass to another. People say, it's the last thing I'll say about it, people say, how can I cooperate with you in this world if I don't trust you? I don't trust you, so I'm not going to cooperate. They have it backwards. First, you cooperate. Then, trust comes. I pass you the ball. Thank you. You gonna pass it back? You pass it back. Oh, that was cool. Trust is building through the cooperative exercise. Cooperate first, then trust will come. Don't wait for trust to cooperate.
I'm big on definitions, and one of the definitions is association of persons for common benefit. You always go for 50. You work for an association of persons for common benefit, but obviously it's easy to say that LeBron James' benefit might be different than this and that benefit. What David says is one thing, it's important. What about your point of view when you have to create a common good for 450 different human beings, different players, different salaries, different many things?
Yeah, that I think is our toughest challenge that we have to tackle, because we are always we have to deal this tension between the interest of one and the interest of 450. And very often, more often than I was imagining, honestly, these two things are actually in contrast with each other.
Sure.
I believe that today technology and just the resources we have really allow us to segment us all. I mean, there are huge companies around the world who are basically making a living out of segmenting us and giving us what we want. I think we can take a piece of their playbook and actually apply it to make sure that in this very complex stakeholder management work that we have to go through, even with only 450 stakeholders, which are our players, we are able to segment and identify commonalities. So we go back, I think, to what David was talking about, around differences that are overcome through the game. There are differences that are carried out in every aspect of our life. And those differences, I repeat, I think needs to be acknowledged. If we acknowledge them, now we are able to serve that cluster of people and that cluster of people. And if our value system is on point, and that's where probably basketball can help us, if our value system is on point and we share the same values, the fundamental ones, then I think we're going to be able to figure it out.
So it's a matter of balancing individual and collective, probably. We talked about that. It's also a matter of trying to balance something else. This is something that is very often a point of discussion in basketball. That guy is strong, he's not very good, he doesn't have a great technique. This guy is skilled, he's not strong enough. Is there a tension between strength and skill? Is there a balance? What are the things we can try to understand by watching basketball, the game?
Yeah, the balance is essentially the line, the entire spectrum of the human condition, of human contributive abilities. Before basketball, most sports were about power and speed. Power and speed. The difference in basketball is they elevated the goal, they put it up here, and in addition to power and speed, you needed to have accuracy and control. This principle stands for the idea that here is a world, basketball, where different kinds of abilities can be the best player, can be the best on the court. There's a guy, you know him, named Nikola Jokic. He says, I don't jump high, I don't run fast, I just play basketball. What does it mean to just play basketball? It means that he lives in a world where many more types of skills are understood. He's strong. Okay, he can't jump. He isn't fast, but he's very quick. We have been in a world, most of the time, where the same kinds of leaders, the same kinds of charismatic, handsome like these two, loud, perhaps wealthy, these are typically the kinds of people who have been leading. What about the quiet? What about the introverted? What about all different kinds of skills that don't get seen, understood right away? You know, we talk about the difference between, people love, wherever I go, the difference between European basketball, and American basketball. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm talking about a game that has forever included both. I just play basketball. The game is the same game. It's the same game. It's a game that allows all different guys. Steph Curry, little guy. Then there's other guys much bigger. Both of them can dominate. This is the new world. This is the 21st century. It's a basketball thing. It's a basketball model.
I think this can be also looked at from the vintage point of Nikola Jokic. Obviously will never be the best athlete in the game, but he has to be a good enough athlete to...
But this is the thing, this idea of athlete.
Yeah?
He's changing the definition.
Okay. obviously.
He's showing, I mean, he's on the court, right, with some of the greatest athletes I've ever seen. Powerful people, speed. But he somehow is the best player, even though he's not athletic.
Yeah.
So he's changing the definition of a basketball player. Let's change the definition of what a leader is.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. The point I was trying to introduce was, this is true, he also had to become a better athlete than he was at the start of his career in the NBA. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone from being drafted 41 to MVP. Or, if you want to take it from the other side, Giannis Antetokounmpo, without mastering moves and skills, wouldn't have made it with all the unbelievable athleticism that he has. So the transformational side that probably Matteo has a better observation point, definitely than mine. I think it's interesting. I mean, how these guys not transform themselves, but what do they do to really get better each and every day? It's just that they decide to. How are they helped by the general situation? What are the drivers for them? Because everybody says, I want to get better, but not everybody becomes Jokic, not everybody becomes Antetokounmpo, starting from where they started. I mean, we know probably 1,000 European players who were, quote unquote, better than Jokic and Antetokounmpo at 18 and 21.
I think the fundamental thing that all these people have in common is, I'm not sure it's a healthy thing, but they do all have it. It's a little bit of an obsession. You know, let's look at a kid here in Trento starting playing basketball at 8, 9 years old in the youth program of Aquila. Is going to get hooked to it. I think many people in this room probably were that kid. Then somebody became very good and kept playing. Somebody stopped playing. But somehow I think sports puts us all in an accelerated evolution path, right? I think that's really what sports exposes us to, the need for a constant evolution. And I think what fascinating to me is, yes, I see Jokic losing 20 kilos and become more athletic, or just redefine, to David's point, the definition of athlete or of athleticism, because now it's more a matter of balance, or it's more a matter of hand-eye coordination than just jumping. But then is what I see and I observe is what they do, the path that they're on to develop off the court. That is insane to me. Like I'm still shocked, because I see them when they come in at 19, and now this is my 9th season. I'm almost seeing like a cycle for some of them, including Nicola, which is an outlier in many ways. It's really to see how they develop as human beings. And it's like if their life is accelerated, they are going out of a gun like a bullet. When they're 35, they have the same amount of experiences and stimuli and things they've been exposed to and places they've been in and people they've met than a normal person at 70 years old. That forces them to take those skills that they have and they cultivate through obsession and put it in motion to actually build the next version of themselves. Even because, you know what? There's another guy ready for one of those 450 spots behind them, because every single basketball player in the world wants to play there, so you have no choice.
Very fascinating to me. Positionless yesterday, but literally yesterday, was something of a negativity term. Like, you're not a 3, you're not a 4, you're nothing. Yeah. You're not a shooter, you're not a passer, you're nothing. Now, positionless is universally known as something good in basketball. Yes. And this, opens a real world.
Yes. I believe, at least in my research, when I researched the beginnings of the game, James Naismith, and he had many disciples, but toward the ends of his life, he had a student named John McClendon. John McClendon was the only African-American ever enrolled in the physical education program at the University of Kansas. And McClendon and Naismith went to a basketball court, and they were watching children play basketball. And Naismith said to McClendon, "What do you see?" And McClendon said, "Well, when they have the ball, they attack the basket. And when the other team has the ball, they attack them." Naismith said, "That's right, that's it, that's the game." And John McClendon invented something called the fast break. The fast break, which is an idea of practically positionless, relentless, end-to-end basketball, where you become whatever position you need to become in order to do what you have to do to solve the problem in front of you that's changing and people coming at you and somebody's over here, and you do what you have to do and you be what you have to be to solve it with other people. This is the mindset of the 21st century future of work. The idea that in a rapidly changing world, a world that changes so fast, technologically, legally, politically, what kind of mind, what kind of person can stand in the middle of that change and think independently, originally, and solve that with other people? I believe it is the positionless mindset. And I could tell you about students who graduate from college and they change their jobs and entire fields will be obsolete. But move even beyond individual people. Think about how we can be positionless as institutions. That a professional basketball team is not just a basketball team winning games, but that it's a social institution in the community. That it's an educational force in the schools. None of us are just one thing. And if we are going to progress as a world, this positionless principle, it's the idea we all need to become. We're not just this or that. The facts and circumstances tell us what the position is. Last thing I'll say is, the remarkable thing about this beginning of the fast break with Naismith and McClendon was that Naismith was trying to show that this is not a game, forgive me, my friend, that requires a coach. It's a game meant for people to figure stuff out with other people. It's a developmental institution. That's what basketball was meant to be.
Matteo, there is positionless and definitionless. I would say, I don't have a definition for Victor Wembanyama. I don't have it yet. And probably developing, in any sense of the word, Victor Wembanyama is, to me, the most fascinating thing that will happen in the next at least 5, probably 10 years in the basketball world. And not necessarily it will end up being a 3-time MVP or whatever. In my opinion, it will be, but we don't know. We didn't think that from that position you would go for a block shot. He's not thinking, he's blocking that shot. He's blocking many of those shots. And how is this perceived in a situation where you probably think we have seen it all, and now you see something else? And also from his point of view, coming from another system, from another culture, what about the back and forth of these dynamics?
So let's stick to the court for a second. There are some basketball gigs, I'm sure, here in the audience. So
Sure.
I don't know if anybody has ever played NBA Jam, the video game. You guys remember NBA Jam? Okay. So there was one characteristic of NBA Jam. There was no offense and there was no defense. Yes, you would go and score, or you would go back and block, but that was somehow a fast break, a continuous fast break. What really freaked me out watching the first 10 games of Victor in the NBA was that he was playing NBA Jam. So there was no distinction between his ability to be on the offensive end and in the defensive end. It would be the one stopping, one recovering the ball, one pushing the ball, and guys would already be on the other side waiting to get a pass, because they knew that the unique skill set of Victor would have put them in the best position possible. It's like everything is accelerated when you are around him. And yeah, we have never seen that before. I don't know if it's replicable. I know one thing, that there will be one day one person that we think he can be Victor, and actually is going to be Victor's evolution. Because if I look at Victor, I see a lot of Giannis in there. I see the ability, I don't know, of Steph Curry to have hand-eye coordination. But he's doing that at 234, height and the length, and it's just amazing. Again, that doesn't go anywhere if there isn't an infrastructure to support him from day one. Marvelous family. An agent who stepped in pretty early and set up this pathway, building a team to support him. A franchise, it looks like scripted by superior entity that has had the type of experience with international players, and honestly also somebody who's incredibly gifted intellectually. And if you guys didn't watch it, go check his podcast last year with JJ Redick. This guy at 19 was talking about his place in the universe, but not because he had the talking points. Like that's how his mind works. He said it, like, don't call me after 9 p.m. I'm going to be reading my book and ready to go to sleep. And in his case, that's not just branding positioning. That's actually facts. And the focus and the incredible concentration of talent across the board is frightening.
David, one of your principles is about alchemy. I read the definition: a power of process that changes or transforms something in a mysterious or impressive way. Let's make it less mysterious and even more impressive.
Alchemy is a disproven science. It's impossible, according to science. It means that you take a scientific property, water, and you turn it into gold. It's impossible, but that was the idea behind alchemy. I say human alchemy because I believe that is what happens in basketball. And I believe it is what must happen if a society is to progress. Meaning, a lot of people in sports like to talk about team chemistry. Team chemistry. They say, team chemistry is, she's like this, he's like that. And together, her being like this, him being like that, that will be a good team. That will be a good combination, good team chemistry. Alchemy is she's like this, he's like that, and together they become something different because of the effect they have on each other, and thus better. They alchemize. So many of us, whether it was during the pandemic or since the pandemic, we sit around and we say, man, things have to change, right? The way the government is, that has to change. The way the schools are, that has to change. Healthcare has to change. How are things going to change if you are still the same? If you do not accept the effect of some type of combination of you and others, and what's happening in the world. Alchemy, if positionless says none of us are just one thing, we can be anything. Alchemy is this idea that we can no longer be what we once were. if we want things to not be as they are. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. That's alchemy. That's human alchemy. That's what happens to the best basketball players when they play with each other. You all of a sudden are like, how did that guy get so good? How did that guy become so interesting? How did that team that I don't know who these guys were, they weren't drafted, how did that happen? It happens all the time in basketball. It has to start to happen in the world writ large.
Talking about global, obviously it's easy to register how global the game is. It's more and more global each and every day. And we, I think, concur on this. I want you to be skeptical for a minute. I mean, don't leave me this role by myself. There are a lot of studies, anthropology, sociology, economics, that, explain the potential dangers of globalization. Is there something dangerous potentially or actually in the globalization of basketball, but probably we should say practically the NBA game?
Well, that's a tough one.
Well, dangerous is probably too strong a word, but something that has unintended consequences that we should try to prevent happening.
I think it's happening. I think you nailed it. First of all, let me acknowledge one thing that David explains in your book so well, which is basketball was global since its very inception,
yes,
right from the very beginning.
That's right.
I'm going to give a couple of examples, then I'll jump back in because.
So many people don't know. They think the dream team, Barcelona, 1992, when the NBA players played in the Olympics and the world started playing more basketball. That, to me, was the explosion, was the detonation of 100 years before, where when basketball was invented, unlike any sport I have known, immediately James Naismith, the man who invented basketball, sent boats of people to teach basketball all over the world. They went to Brazil, to Paris, to Australia, to Tianjin, China. And then in World War I, he was sent to Paris for 19 months to teach basketball for rehabilitation, which began to spread basketball all over Europe in the early 20th century.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for this historical context. That's why I think it's important, is because the mantra I've been hearing since I moved to the US was the game is growing internationally. The game is becoming more and more global. We had 95 international players, and now there are 120, and it's almost 30%. The reality is that, and David just said it, it's not that the game has become more global, because we were playing here a while back, but the business of basketball has become more global. And I think that's the risk, is when we start to look, and I'm wearing my American hat, okay? It's when we start to look at the world outside as one monolith. The Americans say overseas. Overseas is one big monolith. That's not how it is. The world is very diverse. There are very different conditions. And there are different conditions also in the world of basketball. There's Europe, there's Africa, there's Asia. And then sometimes you have some outliers, somebody you don't expect. So new kids on the block, welcome Australia and Japan in the conversation, right? Aquila maybe has to fight versus a proposal that a player gets from Japan nowadays. In the past, it was not even imaginable. So if I go back to the risks, is the fact that I will call it supremacy of the NBA in the basketball world as kind of flattened everything else outside of it. And that is somehow reducing the differences, and so also the ability for certain basketball ecosystems to generate talent. And the fact that now the faces of the NBA are international players, are Nikola, are Giannis, are Jokic, are Embiid.
The last 5 MVPs, 50% of the All-Star players.
So then might the NBA think that they're going to keep coming. They're not going to keep coming if you are eroding the ability of the clubs, the ecosystems, the leagues that have been nurturing talent and give it to you to keep developing them. And so I think that is the big risk that I see in this globalization. It's fantastic to see so many international players. It was a strategic decision that David Stern made a few years ago, and that is paying its dividends right now. It's like a 30 years project. But you got to keep watering, you know, the dirt where you expect fruits to come up from. And I'm not sure that is happening right now.
David, inclusion, big word. My point, very quick. I think we should try to build inclusion more from the foundation, and probably worry a little less about the top of the professional game. What I'm saying when you start playing basketball, you should not be in a position to include or exclude anybody. I think, in my opinion, men and women should start together on the same court at the same time. I understand there are limitations to this, but if really you want to build inclusion, you should be revolutionary there. On the top of the game, I think it's different, but let's start from the idea of inclusion and how basketball as a game can inspire us to include more and better, which is important better, in my opinion.
We were talking now about gender inclusion.
Sure.
Yes. So just like many people don't know that at its beginning, basketball was meant to be global. That was the intention. This is a global thing. And it's an important principle because if something is good and important, it cannot just be for one place. And there are so many things that we need to solve in this world that only one world can solve. Water, climate, hunger, disease. We can go on. If you have a good idea, if you have a good plan, policy, it must be global. It can no longer just be this one place. And as you begin to think about that, you begin to open your eyes and realize that every place on earth, well, they have different hatreds, but every place has gender. Every place has gender. And what a lot of people don't know is that at its origin, basketball was gender inclusive. No other sport. No other sport that I know of, unless there's some new, brand new thing that, you know, that's a pickleball, I don't know. No other sport was intentionally gender inclusive. There were people playing basketball in the gym in Springfield, Massachusetts, and there were some women who were teaching grade school, and they were watching the men play 2 weeks into the invention of this game, 2 weeks. And they went up to the inventor, James Naismith, and they said, "Hey, can we play?" And he said, "Yeah, why not? Why not?" 1891. This is a very different world for women. In many places, they had no right to vote. They had totally unequal rights. And basketball became the lingua franca of the women's movement in the United States. Now, has that principle, has that fundamental principle of gender inclusion really been successful, not just in basketball, but as a broad principle in the world? No, it hasn't. It has not done as well as some of the other things we have talked about. But I put this principle in this book to say, yes, this was a fundamental principle of basketball at its beginning, and it must be a fundamental principle of any plan or policy or society or any idea you have going forward. If it is not gender inclusive, it will fail. And these are we're talking about our sisters, our daughters, our mothers. They are us. And I had one of the greatest women's basketball players before the WNBA, before the ABL. Her name is Teresa Edwards. She played in 5 Olympics for the U.S.
She played over here.
She played over here. Wow. Teresa Edwards, the great Teresa Edwards. And she was in my class. It was the first time I taught the class. And of course, somebody said, well, do you mean that men and women should play together? Is that what you mean? And I'll never forget what she said. She just shook her head. She's like, that's not the point. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about inclusion, period. Inclusion means inclusion. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter the door needs to be open. It means no door, ever, for anyone. Who plays with who? That's organized. That's some league or some business or some other thing. Gender inclusion for the 21st century is a must, and it was a must at the beginning of basketball.
We fast break to the end. You have 5 minutes to talk each other about isolation, sanctuary, which seems to be concepts of being alone, being separated. Sanctuary is a consecrated place. Sacred originally means separated from the rest of the world, and how that relates is connected to the idea of collective and all the things we talked earlier. Gentlemen, it's your court. 5 minutes.
Oh, I'll start with the sanctuary because it's ironic, but one of the initiatives we have been developing internationally with the NBPA is actually the sanctuary. And that also speaks about spaces. So there is a beautiful 2-court gym overlooking at the Mediterranean Sea in Marbella. And so we started 2 years ago, and we brought more than 40 players out there, NBA players, and we built this sanctuary for NBA players. What does that mean? We mean that the guys cannot train in LA or not train in Miami or in Atlanta. They'll do that, but sometimes you require a change of scenery, in particular when there's a long off season. Sometimes you require different stimuli. You need to be exposed to something new culture. Sometimes you have to become a citizen of the globe, a global citizen. And so that's part of our mission. And we brought all of these players out there. And clearly the nightlife in Marbella, I'm not sure you can define it as a sanctuary, because definitely you're not in isolation. But the players actually have the opportunity to discover another part of themselves, be exposed to something different through the game that for many of them have been a sanctuary. A lot of the guys come from very tough backgrounds, and that hoop in the backyard or that hoop at the YMCA or at the high school gym was their sanctuary to escape from very, very tough, violent environments and households.
What Matteo says, these players have found sanctuary since they were young, or still, it's a place they go to hear themselves, to rediscover who they are. It's this thing that everybody keeps chasing called mindfulness, right? I want to be able to really know, what I'm thinking, where I'm at, where I should go next, stabilize my humanity. Drake, the hip-hop star, he has a court in his house. It's called Sanctuary. There's all kinds of people I know who refer to the basketball court as sanctuary because we need it. We need that place to go to somehow remember those parts of ourselves or discover new parts of ourselves, because It's the 21st century. That's why I created these principles, because I'm trying to solve 21st century problems. This is a 21st century problem. Because wherever we go, wherever I go, you know where I am. And you can find me. And you can connect with me. And you can track me. And you can count me. And you can algorithmatize me. It's never been like this before. Whatever I do can be used somehow for something. We need spaces where we can go to hear ourselves again, to just be away from the whole thing, the experience Matteo created for these incredibly busy and pressurized people, because that's where the new ideas come from. That's where the world moves forward. If all we're understanding about ourselves is what we did yesterday, that's what's in here, what I just did, we'll never have a new or totally original or fresh kind of inspiration that's at the essence of who we are, away from the algorithm, away from the geo-track, away from the social media, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I've seen law professors who are demanding that a right to sanctuary, a right to my own experience, and no one else gets to understand my experience, should be a fundamental right, should be in the Constitution. That's how different the time we're living in is now. And it's okay, but basketball, for many people, for a long time, has been the space where people find that sanctuary, so it stands for, it represents, I think, what is desperately needed today.
I would never run out of questions. I would never run out of observations, but time is time. So I don't know if now there is a space for Q&As from the spectators. That would be probably welcome. And I just want to say one last thing on my part. There is a part of the book that says that James Naismith probably would have said that basketball belongs to nobody and everybody. I mean, this is really etched in stone. Basketball belongs to nobody and everybody. We should remember that a little more. Maybe, thanks to David, thanks to Matteo, we will remember that at least for someday. Thanks.
Thank you, Flavio.
Thank you, Flavio. Grazie.
Beh, ringraziamo David, Matteo e Flavio perché è stata un'ora e 10 straordinaria, interessantissima. Complimenti e grazie davvero. Farei ancora un applauso, davvero, perché credo che sia uno di quei momenti, questi molto importanti per Aquila Basket, perché ci siamo veramente immersi in un mondo che va oltre veramente la pallacanestro e anzi con la pallacanestro abbiamo girato, ci siamo proiettati nel mondo e nelle grandi sfide. C'è qualcuno che vuole fare qualche domanda? Dai, soprattutto i giovani ragazzi, vedo che ci sono. Eccolo là, vai. Anche in tedesco, come vuoi tu? Dai.
I found out that they are almost perfect for a lot of situations, but the thing that makes me a bit confused about what you said is that will having the same solution for different problems last long, or will it become a problem itself? I just want to know what you think about this point.
Scusa, ti chiami? Come si chiama?
Thank you, Christian. Christian Lorenz.
Sei uno studente, giusto?
Sì, I'm a student of high school in Rovereto.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I love students. You mean the same solutions, the same principles, will they be good forever, or? Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely. This is now me, one person, looking at the 21st century and saying, I think I'm going to try and run the break. I'm going to look at what's coming at me. I'm going to look at what I know. And I'm going to create something that I hope people can, at least for a minute, come together on and apply and change things. I hope there are new things and new ideas. That is my dream, that perhaps some of these principles will be forever. I think cooperation, that's a pretty good one, as long as we are human beings. There are many of them that I think that are, in fact, I think many of these principles are basic. They're simple. They're a return to a less complicated environment, a less complicated relationship, a different paradigm that's an old paradigm for new problems that people seem to, have forgotten how to solve just with simple things. I hope that answers your question.
Qualcun altro? Allora, Giorgio Gandolfi.
I don't have any question, only to underline that you talk about inclusion. Basketball is the first sport in the world that created basking. Basking is, basketball is inclusive. So we are always on the top, every time, only this.
So I would just add to my great friend, basking is an incredible invention with basketball where differently abled people play together. And I believe it's because basketball is basketball, because it's that basic communication. It doesn't matter what kind of ability you have. And I will add that 3 years ago, when I met Luigi in Porretta Terme, I met a professor who used to be a coach named Marco Calamai, who explained to me how he used basketball to treat autism, having young autistic children look into the eyes of their parents for the first time because basketball makes you do this, just makes you look up. Wow, it's powerful.
C'è un altro? Ecco, ti presenti e fai la domanda.
Chiedo scusa. Abbiamo una domanda per Matteo. Voi come NBPA, come avete gestito la situazione, appunto quella mentale di Ricky Rubio, che aveva avuto problemi di salute mentale? Cioè, se era vostra responsabilità o...
Chiaramente è una questione personale, quindi la lasciamo personale, però posso generalizzare dicendoti che prima di tutto è una domanda molto importante, perché non è solo Ricky, non è solo DeMar DeRozan, non è solo Kevin Love, le persone che hanno avuto il coraggio di mettersi a nudo davanti a tutti, no? Prendere responsabilità in qualche modo di questi momenti difficili che attraversano, che la loro vita, il loro talento, i loro skills li mettono nella condizione di subire in una dimensione ancora più grande. E, come organizzazione abbiamo un mental health program, l'abbiamo sviluppato immediatamente dopo che DeMar DeRozan e Kevin Love sono andati pubblicamente a raccontare la loro storia. C'è un medical director, ci sono un network di psicologi e psichiatri completamente indipendenti dalle squadre, completamente indipendenti dalla Lega, che i giocatori possono attivare per avere il supporto di cui hanno bisogno. E quindi ci sono due aspetti, quello più personale, e lo lasciamo tale, del supporto che diamo agli individui, ma poi c'è più quello sistemico, che è stato creare appunto questa infrastruttura per fare in modo che i ragazzi si sentano sempre più a loro agio nel utilizzare questo tipo di supporto, in particolar modo tanti dei ragazzi americani, nella cui nelle cui comunità c'è uno stigma ancora fortissimo intorno alla salute mentale e al supporto che puoi o devi o vuoi attivare.
Qualche altro? Laggiù in fondo?
Yeah, hi, David. Dan is my name, and basketball used to be my game, and kind of old now to play. But I have 3 specific questions from a psychological, cooperative learning point of view, which I would like you to answer using your own words. First one is, how would you define positive and negative interdependency? Second, how would you define independent accountability? And 3, last one, role or perspective reversal. Appreciate it.
I don't know. Maybe I'll start with the last one.
Perspective reversal. Yeah, getting into somebody else's shoes, kind of.
Yes. You know, I do believe that a basketball court is an empathy lab, because the more you are next to, near, in person, in real life, in this proximity with other people, you can begin to understand the totality of their communication. You develop something called social intelligence, which is like emotional intelligence. But that only happens in person, not on Zoom, not remotely. I understand these are phenomenal technological tools, and they're very important to connect people when they can't be connected otherwise, just like the telephone was in the beginning and so on. But nothing creates the first thing, the positive interdependency, and the second thing was what?
Individual accountability.
Yeah. Once I know you and you know me, we begin to develop our own standard. This is the alchemy. Our own standard of understanding, our own standard of cooperation. It's not generic. This is not a cold concept. It's something that only happens when you are in space together, moving in space together, seeing all the little kinds of things that my eyes, I'm checking him out, okay, he's nodding his head, cool. You know, that kind of thing. That's how it works. It's called being a human being.
Altre domande? Eccola giù in fondo.
Professor Hollander, thanks a lot for... I'm here. Thanks a lot for the contribution. I have 2 very broad questions, which I will narrow down dramatically. So the first question is how basketball can save Trento, and the second question is how basketball can save David Hollander. The first question relates to the fact that thanks to Aquila Basket and the University of Trento, yesterday you met with a group of leaders from the University of Trento. And I was wondering whether you have some Trento reflection on your adventure in the last 2 days. The second question, if I read here the small, I don't know, figurina, card that was given outside, it says that you were somebody who did most falls, technical falls, in a season and in a career. So I was wondering, maybe rather than how basketball can save David Hollander, when did it save David Hollander? Thanks a lot.
I love this guy. Okay, well, I'll start with the most important, Trento. I've been thinking a lot about Trento since I've been here. It's a beautiful place. I have begun to know the basketball community. I've begun to know the University of Trento community and some of the leaders in Trento, and I've been walking around on my own, you know, just going in and out of places and meeting people. And I don't think it's how basketball can save Trento. I think it's how Trento can save the world. I see, well, I know, first of all, that Andrea Nardelli has a vision. It's a very innovative, very unique, very enlightened vision of how a basketball organization can be more than a basketball organization. He understands already that basketball is more, but he's seeing very 13 principal ways that his organization, a basketball organization, can be more than that. And then you begin to see, by example, how Trento can be more than Trento is. I can't help but notice that the city of Trento is like a basketball arena. You have the big mountains on the side, the big sides, right? And then the valley. The city is the court. And I walk on those little streets. They're intimate spaces. And everybody's checking everybody out. Okay, I got you, right? Oh, yeah, uh-huh. And you're cooperating, and you're sharing space, and you're having that communication. This is the most basketball place I've ever been to. And that you have this visionary, like forward-thinking basketball organization, it's not a surprise to me. I met some of the men who began basketball here, and I believe that they began something that will be one of the greatest opportunities for girls in all of Italy and all of Europe, in Trento. And that it will be influenced by Aquila basket. And it will be influenced by the physical surrounding. And that this will become a destination, not just to see basketball, it will, but it will become a destination to see how values of basketball flow and permeate through all the social institutions, because basketball itself is a social institution. When I teach my course, the first thing I say is, this is not a course about the NBA. This is a course about a game. A game that was not just, well, it was never meant for hyper-commercialized purposes or just elite athletic development. It was meant to make people better people. And I see the ingredients to do that in Trento like no place, I mean this, no place better. Basketball has already saved me. Basketball brought me here. It's brought me to all kinds of places. It's become a language that I've spoken all over the world, but it's become the key that unlocked my mind. A frustrated professor teaching sports business who knew that sports is more. I didn't know exactly why or what, but I knew it was more. And I guess I needed the world to break a little to force me to go there. And wow, what a trip. My brother was the leading scorer in our high school's history before three-pointers and before a freshman could play. And he played professional basketball internationally. My sister, 1,000 points, 1,000 assists, and she played in college. It's true, I hold one record that is the most technical fouls in my high school in a season and career. But I believe that that was the beginning of my intellectual subversion. I was subverting the form, just like I am somehow, I hope, subverting the form of basketball in the most positive, interdependent way. Thank you very much.
Se c'è ancora una domanda, poi chiudiamo. No, non c'è più nessuno. Allora, ringraziando tutti quanti e invitandovi ovviamente alla partita, perché giochiamo anche ogni tanto, quindi domani sera contro Sassari, che è un match molto importante, quindi desideriamo avere il massimo del supporto, vi invitiamo tutti alla partita. Io lascio per il saluto finale la parola al dottor Umberto Gandini, presidente della Lega Basket di Serie A, che ci ha cortesemente fatto l'onore di essere qua con noi stasera.
Buonasera, mi spetta il compito di chiudere una straordinaria esperienza, direi, per tutti noi, per me in particolare. È stata quella appunto di scoprire come il gioco, che ha fatto parte della nostra crescita, della nostra cultura, a Trento come a Varese, a Milano come a Napoli e ad altre parti, possa essere una delle risposte che il mondo sta cercando da tempo. Anch'io ho avuto una recente conoscenza con le tesi di David, ho cercato di leggere il libro, ho cercato di condividere con lui oggi a pranzo qualche concetto, ma la cosa che porto via da questa esperienza è intanto un grandissimo grazie all'Aquila Basket per quello che ha fatto, per quello che fa quotidianamente per il nostro gioco, per la nostra Lega e per aver organizzato un'opportunità come questa. Domani c'è la partita Trento con Sassari, non contro Sassari. Mi piacerebbe che questo diventasse un po' lo spirito di quello che è comunque già parte integrante dei valori della nostra Lega. Grazie ancora e buona serata.
Con Venezia farò un po' di fatica. Grazie a tutti, buona serata e ci vediamo domani.